In the year 2184, Earth had become a minor outpost in the Galactic Coalition, a vast, multi-species alliance that spanned the entire Milky Way. For centuries, humanity had lived in relative peace with their alien neighbors, trading technology and resources, learning from the advanced civilizations that had mastered faster-than-light travel long before humans even knew of their existence. Yet, despite the Coalition's promises of unity and safety, there were regions in the galaxy that remained untamed. These were the outer territories, lawless and dangerous, inhabited by rogue species who rejected the Coalition's authority. It was from one of these territories that the Arcanis emerged. The Arcanis were a warrior race, towering beings with obsidian black armor that melded with their skin, and eyes that glowed like molten coals. Their culture was brutal, their technology powerful, but what made them truly fearsome was their code of conquest. For centuries, they had pillaged and raided weaker worlds, taking prisoners and resources to feed their war machines. And now, their gaze had fallen upon a human transport ship carrying colonists through the outer sectors of space. Among those aboard was Lydia Novak, a 5-year-old girl traveling with her parents. They had been on their way to Ganymede, one of Jupiter's moons, where a new human colony was being established. For Lydia, the journey had been a thrilling adventure. She had spent most of the trip staring out of the ship's observation deck, watching stars drift by like diamonds scattered across the black velvet of space. That night, while Lydia slept in the safety of her cabin, the Arcani struck. Their warship descended upon the human transport with terrifying speed, bypassing the ship's defenses with ease. The humans never stood a chance. Klaxons blared as the ship shuddered under the impact of boarding pods. The lights flickered, and the hum of the engine stuttered as the Arcani soldiers stormed aboard. Lydia awoke to the sound of explosions and screams. The walls of her cabin trembled, and the air felt cold and thin. She sat up, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Her mother rushed into the room, eyes wild, pulling Lydia from her bed. "Lydia, sweetie, we have to go." "Now," her mother said, her voice trembling as she wrapped Lydia in a blanket. "Mommy, what's happening?" Lydia asked, her voice tiny, barely audible over the blaring alarms. Her mother didn't answer. There wasn't time. The door to their cabin hissed open, and her father appeared, his face pale but determined. "The escape pods," he said quickly, scooping Lydia into his arms. "We'll be safe there." Together, they ran through the narrow corridors of the ship, dodging fallen debris and bodies of crew members who had been caught in the initial attack. The ship groaned under the weight of the assault. Fires raged in some sections, and the lights flickered ominously. The sounds of the invading Arcani soldiers' heavy, booted footsteps and guttural alien commands echoed through the halls. Lydia's heart pounded in her chest. They reached the escape pods, where a handful of other survivors were already scrambling to get aboard. Lydia's father placed her into a pod, buckling her into a seat before turning back to her mother. "Get her out of here," he urged. "I'll hold them off." "No. You have to come with us," her mother cried, grabbing his arm. Before he could respond, a deafening crash echoed through the corridor. The bulkhead doors were ripped apart, and the Arcanis poured through. Hulking figures in dark armor, each standing well over 7 feet tall, wielding glowing energy blades. They moved with terrifying precision, cutting down anyone in their path. Lydia's mother screamed and slammed her hand on the pod's release button, but before the door could fully seal, one of the Arcanis reached in and dragged her back out. Lydia screamed as she watched her parents disappear in a blur of violence. The pod door sealed shut. Through the small window, Lydia saw the chaos unfolding outside, her father trying to fight the Arcanis with nothing but a wrench, her mother struggling in the grip of a soldier. But before Lydia could even process what was happening, the pod shot out into space, leaving the scene of carnage behind. The ship grew smaller and smaller in the distance, until it was nothing more than a tiny speck against the endless sea of stars. Hours passed as Lydia's escape pod drifted aimlessly. The small craft had enough oxygen for a few days, but Lydia didn't know what to do. She huddled in her seat, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes red and swollen from crying. She wanted her parents, but she knew they weren't coming. Just when the cold silence of space seemed like it would stretch on forever, the pod shuddered. A shadow passed over the window, and Lydia looked up to see something massive blotting out the stars. Another ship larger and far more menacing than the one she had been on. The pod systems whined as it was pulled into the ship's docking bay by a tractor beam. The doors opened with a hiss, and Lydia's small form was dwarfed by the colossal figure standing before her. It was Kratok, the leader of the Arcani's raiders. His armor gleamed in the dim light, and his four glowing eyes scanned her with cold amusement. "Such a small, fragile thing," he rumbled, his voice deep and guttural. He reached down, lifting Lydia effortlessly with one massive hand. "You humans are weak. But no matter. You will serve your purpose." Lydia struggled in his grasp, but it was no use. Kratok carried her like a doll through the ship's dark corridors until they reached a holding area where other prisoners were kept. Alien creatures from across the galaxy, slaves, soldiers, and civilians all sat huddled in fear. The stench of despair filled the air. Kratok tossed Lydia into a cage, and the door slammed shut with a heavy clang. She landed hard, the cold metal floor bruising her knees, but she didn't cry. She had no tears left. "Prepare her for the Ralvik beast," Kratok ordered one of his soldiers. "It's been too long since it's had a human child to feed on." The soldier nodded and left, leaving Lydia in her cage. She shivered, not from the cold but from fear. She didn't know what a Ralvik beast was, but the way Kratok said it made her stomach churn. The other prisoners looked at her with pity, but none dared speak. They knew her fate. Lydia curled up in a corner of the cage, clutching her stuffed rabbit to her chest. She stared out of the bars at the alien stars beyond the ship, feeling more alone than she ever had before. Her parents were gone. She was just a little girl in a galaxy that didn't care about her. But she had no idea that the creature she was destined to face wasn't what everyone thought. The Arcani's warship cut through the starry void like a predator moving silently through the dark depths of space. Within its cold, metallic belly, Lydia sat huddled in her cage, the clangs and hums of alien machinery rattling through the ship. Her wide eyes stared out at the other prisoners, a collection of defeated creatures from across the galaxy. Most of them were too weak or too frightened to even acknowledge her, their faces filled with the despair of knowing what awaited them. The Arcanis were taking them to Vorkan Prime. Rumors of Vorkan Prime had spread far and wide, a volcanic wasteland controlled by the Arcanis, where their most fearsome creature, the Ralvik beast, resided. The beast was not just a simple creature of war, it was a living weapon, bred and conditioned by the Arcanis over generations. Its hunger was legendary, and it was said to crave flesh, especially the flesh of alien species that the Arcanis had captured. Lydia was too young to understand the full extent of the terror surrounding the Ralvik beast, but she felt the tension in the air, the way the other prisoners whispered in hushed tones when the Arcanis weren't looking. She heard bits and pieces of their conversations, enough to know that no one survived once they were taken into the beast's lair. "She's just a child," one alien, a reptilian creature with scales like shimmering emeralds, whispered to another prisoner. "She won't last a second in the pit." The other prisoner, a hunched figure with leathery skin and glowing eyes, shook his head. "The Arcanis don't care. They'll feed her to it like they've fed hundreds before." Lydia clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter, pressing her face into its worn fur. She didn't know what was happening or why she was here. All she wanted was to wake up and find herself back with her parents, on their ship, heading to Ganymede. But deep down, she knew that wasn't going to happen. The ship shook slightly as it entered Vorkan Prime's atmosphere, the heat from the volcanic planet below causing the metal walls to groan and creak. Through a small viewport in the cage area, Lydia could see the fiery surface of the planet, a landscape of bubbling lava flows, jagged black mountains, and towering plumes of ash and smoke. The sky above was a swirling mass of dark clouds, tinged red from the ever-present volcanic eruptions. The ship descended into a massive crater that served as the landing site. There, hidden beneath the surface of the planet, was the lair of the Ralvik beast. Kratok, the leader of the Arcani's raiders, entered the prisoner hold, his imposing figure filling the doorway. His black armor gleamed in the dim light, and his 4 eyes glowed with a malevolent satisfaction as he looked over the prisoners. "Welcome to Vorkan Prime," Kratok growled, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You are all about to witness the power of the Ralvik beast, the most fearsome creature in the galaxy. Today, it will be fed, and one of you will be the offering." He turned his gaze to Lydia, his expression cruel. "The human child will be the first." 2 Arcani's guards unlatched the cage door and grabbed Lydia by the arms, dragging her out. She kicked and squirmed, but their grip was too strong. The other prisoners watched, helpless and horrified, knowing there was nothing they could do. Kratok led the way, taking Lydia through a series of dimly lit tunnels deep beneath the planet's surface. The air grew thicker and hotter as they descended, the ground beneath them trembling from the distant eruptions. The walls of the tunnels were lined with strange, glowing red crystals that pulsed with energy, casting an eerie light on everything around them. Lydia could feel the heat radiating off the walls, and the occasional hiss of steam escaping from cracks in the rock made her jump. Finally, they arrived at a massive, cavernous chamber, the lair of the Ralvik beast. The chamber was immense, its ceiling towering high above, lost in the shadows. The ground was uneven, dotted with pools of molten lava that bubbled and spat angrily. Massive stone pillars, carved with ancient Arcani symbols, lined the perimeter, giving the space an almost ceremonial feel. At the far end of the chamber was an enormous stone altar, cracked and weathered from centuries of use. Chains dangled from its sides, and scorch marks marred the surface. Kratok strode to the altar and motioned for the guards to bring Lydia forward. She was too frightened to resist now, her body trembling uncontrollably. The guards lifted her up and chained her to the altar, the heavy ironed cuffs far too large for her tiny wrists. The cold metal bit into her skin, and she could feel the heat from the lava pools warming the stone beneath her. The Arcani's warriors gathered around the altar, chanting in their guttural, alien language. Their deep, rhythmic voices echoed through the chamber, filling it with an air of dark anticipation. Kratok raised his arms, and the chanting grew louder. "Let the beast come forth!" Kratok bellowed, his voice booming. A low, rumbling growl filled the chamber, so deep that Lydia could feel it vibrating through the stone beneath her. The ground trembled, and from the farthest shadows of the cavern, the Ralvik beast emerged. At first, it was just a silhouette, a massive, hulking form moving slowly through the darkness. Then, as it drew closer, its true size became apparent. The beast was enormous, its body covered in thick, armored scales that glistened in the dim red light. It stood on 6 powerful legs, each one ending in sharp, clawed feet that scraped against the stone. Its head was crowned with jagged horns, and its 6 glowing eyes stared down at Lydia with a terrifying intensity. Its maw, filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth, dripped with saliva as it growled hungrily. The Arcani's warriors cheered as the beast approached the altar, their voices rising in excitement. They had seen this many times before, and the outcome was always the same. The Ralvik beast would devour the sacrifice, and then return to the depths of the planet until it was time to feed again. But as the beast loomed over Lydia, something unexpected happened. It hesitated. The creature's glowing eyes, which had been filled with hunger and rage, suddenly softened as they locked onto Lydia's terrified gaze. It sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring as it took in her scent. A deep, rumbling growl resonated from its throat, but it did not attack. Instead, it lowered its massive head to her level, its breath hot and sulphurous. Lydia, too frightened to scream, stared back at the beast. Her heart pounded in her chest, but something about the creature's eyes kept her from closing hers. There was something there, something beyond the savage hunger she had expected. A glimmer of recognition, of understanding. The Ralvik beast's eyes flashed with an eerie glow, and suddenly, Lydia felt a strange sensation wash over her. It was as though an invisible connection had been made, a link between her mind and the creature's. She could feel its presence inside her head, an ancient, powerful presence, filled with knowledge and memories that spanned eons. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed in her mind. "You are not food. You are the kin." Lydia blinked, her breath catching in her throat. Kin? She didn't understand. How could she be connected to this beast, this terrifying creature of legend? She was just a little girl, a human child. But the voice inside her mind spoke with certainty, and she could feel the truth of it, even if she couldn't fully grasp it. The beast lifted its head and turned toward the Arcani's warriors, who had fallen silent, their cheers replaced by confused whispers. Kratak's expression darkened, his 4 eyes narrowing in anger. "Ralvik, obey!" Kratak roared, stepping forward. "Take the offering. Devour it." But the beast did not move. It let out a low, warning growl, its eyes flashing with defiance. The Arcani soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to do. This had never happened before. The Ralvik beast had never refused a sacrifice. Kratak's anger flared, and he drew his energy blade, the weapon crackling with blue energy. "I command you, beast. Take the offering or I will kill you myself." He charged at the creature, blade raised, but the Ralvik beast was faster. With a powerful swing of its tail, it knocked Kratak off his feet, sending him crashing into the stone wall of the cavern. The impact was so strong that the entire chamber shook. The other Arcani soldiers backed away, their weapons drawn, but they didn't dare approach the beast. They knew what it was capable of, and they were terrified. Lydia, still chained to the altar, watched in stunned silence as the Ralvik beast turned back to her. Its eyes softened again, and it lowered its head once more, nudging her gently with its massive snout. For the first time since her capture, Lydia felt a glimmer of hope. The creature wasn't going to hurt her. The Ralvik beast stood protectively over Lydia, its enormous body casting a shadow across the entire cavern. The Arcani's warriors, who had once cheered for the child's sacrifice, were now frozen in disbelief. The impossible had happened. The Ralvik beast, the most fearsome predator in the galaxy, was defying its masters. The air was thick with tension, the only sound the crackling of the molten lava in the pools around them. Kratak, still sprawled against the stone wall where the beast had thrown him, staggered to his feet, his eyes blazing with fury. His armor was scorched and dented, but his rage was more powerful than any physical pain. He raised his energy blade again, pointing it toward the beast. "Destroy the creature," he bellowed to his soldiers. "It has gone rogue." The Arcani's warriors hesitated, their loyalty to Kratak clashing with the primal fear that gripped them. They had seen the beast in action before, seeing it tear apart armies and ships without hesitation. But this was something else. The Ralvik beast wasn't just defying its orders, it was protecting a human child. None of them had ever witnessed such an act, and it left them rattled. Lydia, still chained to the stone altar, could feel the beast's immense power pulsing through the air around her. She no longer felt afraid, though. Instead, she felt a strange calmness, as if she and the beast were connected by something ancient and unexplainable. She had heard its voice in her mind, it had called her kin. And now, as she gazed into its glowing eyes, she could feel a deep understanding forming between them. The Ralvik beast lowered its head once again, this time touching its massive snout to Lydia's hand. The moment her fingers brushed against its scales, a surge of energy shot through her. It was like nothing she had ever felt before, warm, powerful, and filled with an ancient wisdom that flowed into her mind like a river of stars. Lydia gasped, her eyes widening as visions began to flood her thoughts. She saw the universe as the beast saw it, vast, endless, and filled with wonders beyond imagination. She saw ancient civilizations long gone, their cities stretching across entire planets, their people wise and powerful. She saw the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of stars, and the creation of worlds. She saw the Ralvic beast itself, not as a mere creature, but as a guardian, a protector of something far greater than the Arcanes or even humanity could comprehend. "I was born to protect the Starborn," the voice echoed in Lydia's mind. "You are one of them. A child of the stars. I have waited eons for your return." Lydia didn't fully understand, but she could feel the truth of it in her bones. Somehow, she was connected to this ancient lineage. The beast spoke of a lineage that had long been forgotten by the galaxy. The Starborn were once a mighty people, beings of immense power who had spread across the stars, leaving traces of their existence in the farthest reaches of the universe. And now, that legacy had awoken within her. The chains that held her to the altar suddenly shattered, crumbling to dust as the energy between Lydia and the Ralvic beast grew stronger. She stood up slowly, her small form dwarfed by the towering creature beside her. But she didn't feel small anymore. She felt powerful. Kratak's eyes widened in shock as he saw the chains disintegrate, his mind racing to comprehend what was happening. "What trickery is this?" he snarled, stepping forward, his energy blade humming with lethal intent. "The girl is no Starborn. She's nothing but a human child." Lydia turned to face him, her eyes glowing faintly with the same ethereal light that shone from the Ralvic beast. She didn't speak, but her gaze was steady, unafraid. Kratak sneered, raising his blade to strike. But before he could take another step, the Ralvic beast let out a deafening roar, a sound that shook the very foundations of the cavern. The Arcanes warriors stumbled back, clutching their weapons, but none dared move any closer. The ground beneath them trembled, cracked spiderwebbing across the stone as the beast's power surged. Lydia could feel the energy inside her building, growing stronger with each passing second. The visions in her mind intensified, showing her more of the Starborn's legacy, their ability to command the forces of the cosmos, to reshape reality itself. The Ralvic beast had been created to serve them, and now it recognized her as one of its true masters. "You have the power," the voice whispered in her mind. "You can protect yourself. You can protect us all." Instinctively, Lydia raised her hand, and a wave of invisible energy burst from her fingertips, slamming into Kratak. He was thrown across the chamber, his energy blade flying from his grasp as he crashed into the wall with a sickening thud. The remaining Arcani soldiers watched in disbelief, their fear growing with each second. Kratak groaned as he struggled to stand, his eyes burning with fury. "You think you can defeat me, child?" he spat, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "I am Kratak, warlord of the Arcanes. I will not be beaten by a mere human." But Lydia wasn't listening. She could feel the power of the Starborn coursing through her veins now, and with it came a growing sense of purpose. She wasn't just a helpless child anymore. She was something more, something the Arcanes couldn't possibly understand. The Ralvic beast stepped forward, its massive form towering over the fallen warlord. It let out a low, rumbling growl, warning Kratak to stay down. But the warlord, in his arrogance, refused to yield. He reached for his energy blade, intending to strike one final blow. Before he could, Lydia spoke, her voice soft, but filled with the authority of the ancient power within her. "Stop." The single word echoed through the chamber, and to everyone's astonishment, Kratak froze. His hand hovered over the hilt of his weapon, but he couldn't move. It was as if an invisible force held him in place, his body locked by Lydia's command. The Arcanes warriors, witnessing their leader's defeat, began to back away, their weapons lowered. They had no interest in challenging whatever power this girl now possessed. They had come to feed her to the beast, but now it seemed she had become something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Lydia stepped forward, her hand still raised, her eyes still glowing with the faint light of the Starborn. She didn't know how she was doing this, how she was controlling the very will of the warlord, but she didn't need to understand it fully. She just knew that she had the power to stop him, and she intended to use it. "Leave this place," she said quietly, but the command was unmistakable. Take your soldiers and go. Don't come back. Kratak's face twisted with rage and disbelief, but he was powerless to resist. Slowly, he nodded, his body trembling with frustration. The force holding him in place released, and he slumped forward, defeated. With a final, venomous glance at Lydia, Kratak turned and barked an order to his remaining soldiers. They moved quickly, retreating from the cavern without a word. The warlord limped after them, his pride shattered, but his life spared for now. As the Arcani's warship rose into the sky, leaving Vorkin Prime behind, Lydia stood alone in the center of the cavern. The Ralvik beast lowered its head, gently nuzzling her shoulder. She placed a hand on its snout, feeling the warmth of its breath, the steady rhythm of its heart. "You saved me," Lydia whispered. "Thank you." The beast's eyes glowed softly, and the voice returned to her mind. "No. You saved us." Lydia smiled, a quiet understanding passing between them. She wasn't just a little girl anymore. She was part of something far greater than she had ever imagined, a legacy of power and protection that had been dormant for centuries. And now, it had awakened. The Arcani's warship roared into the atmosphere, a burning trail of defeat marking its departure from Vorkin Prime. Lydia stood in the center of the cavern, watching it disappear into the distance. Her small hand rested on the snout of the Ralvik beast, feeling its steady breaths, a comforting rhythm in the chaos that had just unfolded. The air was heavy with the scent of sulfur and molten rock, the heat from the lava pools casting an eerie glow over the jagged walls of the beast's lair. But Lydia felt no fear now. Not with the power that hummed through her body, a warm current of energy that seemed to pulse in time with the beast's heart. The connection between them was undeniable, ancient, and deep. Lydia looked up at the Ralvik beast, its 6 glowing eyes watching her with an intelligence that went far beyond mere instinct. It had called her kin, recognized something within her that the Arcanis could not. She was no ordinary child, she was a starborn, a descendant of an ancient and powerful race that had once spanned the galaxy, shaping worlds, protecting life, and commanding the forces of the cosmos. But the Starborn had long been forgotten, their legacy buried beneath the tides of time, their power dormant. Until now. As Lydia stood there, the memories of the Starborn continued to unfurl in her mind. She saw visions of their vast cities, shimmering towers that reached into the sky, powered by the very stars themselves. She saw their ships, great vessels of light and energy that sailed across galaxies with ease, and their people tall, radiant beings, whose eyes glowed with the same light that now shone faintly in Lydia's own. But she also saw their fall. An ancient war, one that had nearly wiped them from existence. A betrayal from within their ranks, leading to the Starborn's eventual downfall. Their cities crumbled, their ships lost, and their people scattered across the galaxy, hidden in plain sight among the lesser races, their power forgotten even by themselves. Lydia was one of the last of them. The realization hit her with a weight that was almost too much to bear. She was a child, but now she carried the responsibility of a people long thought extinct. She wasn't just connected to the Ralvik beast, she was the key to awakening something far greater. The beast rumbled softly, as if sensing her thoughts. Its voice echoed in her mind, deep and resonant. "You are not alone, child of the stars. The others will come. They will hear the call." Lydia frowned, uncertain. The others? The Ralvik beast shifted, lifting its head as it gazed up toward the sky. The cavern walls seemed to hum in response, the crystals embedded in the rock beginning to pulse with light. A soft vibration filled the air, a sound like a distant chime carried on the wind. "The Starborn are not gone," the voice continued. "They sleep, hidden among the stars, scattered across the galaxy. But they will awaken. The bloodline remains, and it is time for them to return." Lydia felt a surge of hope, but also fear. How could she, a small girl from Earth, bring back an entire race? What if they didn't want to be found? What if they had forgotten who they were, just as she had? But the Ralvik beast seemed to sense her hesitation. It lowered its massive head again, this time so that its eyes were level with hers. The warmth of its presence washed over her, and the ancient voice filled her mind once more, comforting and wise. You are stronger than you know, Lydia. The starborn power flows through your veins. You have already awakened it. You will guide the others. A ripple of energy passed through Lydia's body as the beast's words sank in. She could feel the truth of them deep within her. The fear that had gripped her since her capture by the Arcanes began to melt away, replaced by a quiet determination. She wasn't just a child anymore. She was something more, something powerful. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and Lydia looked down to see the glowing crystals embedded in the stone floor pulsing brighter now, their light growing stronger with each passing second. The vibration in the air grew louder, a deep hum that resonated in her bones. The Ralvic beast lifted its head and roared, a sound so powerful that it shook the very walls of the cavern. The sound wasn't just a warning, it was a call, sent out into the universe like a beacon. Lydia didn't understand how, but she knew that this was the signal the beast had spoken of. A call to the remaining starborn, wherever they were, to awaken. Far beyond the reaches of Vorkan Prime, across distant star systems and forgotten worlds, the call echoed. It resonated with those who shared Lydia's ancient bloodline, those who had lived their lives unaware of the power slumbering within them. Some of them would hear it in their dreams, others in the quiet moments between thoughts, but all of them would feel the pull, a deep, instinctual need to follow it. The starborn were awakening. As the echo of the beast's roar faded, Lydia felt a strange peace settle over her. The weight of her newfound responsibility was still there, but it was no longer overwhelming. She wasn't alone. Others would come. And together, they would rebuild what had been lost. But even as hope filled her heart, she knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. The Arcanes would return, they always did. Kratok would not forget the humiliation of his defeat, and he would want revenge. And it wouldn't just be the Arcanes. There were others in the galaxy who feared the Starborn, who would see their return as a threat to their own power. The galaxy was vast, and Lydia's journey was only beginning. Where do we go now? Lydia asked softly, her hand still resting on the Ralvic beast's snout. The beast rumbled, its eyes glowing brightly as it looked toward the cavern's exit, where the sky beyond was filled with stars. We go to the stars, it said. We find the others. And together, we reclaim our legacy. Lydia nodded, feeling a strange sense of purpose settle into her heart. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, the Ralvic beast moving beside her. The two of them emerged from the cavern, stepping into the open air of Vorkan Prime. The volcanic landscape stretched out before them, but beyond that, the stars endless and full of possibility. As they stood together on the edge of the crater, Lydia raised her hand to the sky, her eyes glowing with the light of the Starborn. In the distance, the first of many stars began to blink back. The Starborn were returning. And the galaxy would never be the same again.